This time out, we'll take a look at Brasov, Romania. This town is situated in the famed Transylvania region, but there's been absolutely nothing scary about my short stay here. I've spent my time checking out places that you might want to visit if you ever decide to stop by. The list of cool places is lengthy and includes everything from the Black Church to a cable car ride up Tampa Mountain to a museum dedicated to what life was like here under communism. As a special treat, the annual Oktoberfest celebration is going on while I'm here. I'm so excited for you to see all that. Brasov is the sixth largest city in Romania, with around 250,000 people living here. The majority of tourists who visit will be most interested in the well-preserved Old Town. The centerpiece of that area is Council Square. This has been a beautiful open space and a place for people to gather for centuries. Weekly and annual markets were held here as early as 1364. Many historic buildings form the perimeter of the square. Almost all of them date to the 18th and 19th centuries. Restaurants with seating actually on the square are prominent. This structure in the middle of the square is the Council House. The date of construction was 1420. It served as the mayor's office building for around 500 years. Today, it is the home of the Brasov Museum of History. Another focal point within the square is this fountain. Its design is certainly interesting, and it draws the attention of everyone who travels through the space. Circular seating surrounding the jets of water provides the opportunity to sit and be mesmerized. Another water feature is much more subtle and could easily be missed. I enjoyed the spiral channel in the ground level piece. Situated amongst the buildings to the side of the square is the Dormition of the Mother of God Church. This was built in the late 19th century. It has a beautiful facade which adds to the appeal of the plaza. When I was in Brasov, the Council Square hosted a tribute to Ion Popescu Gopo. He was involved in the entertainment industry as an animator, an actor, and a film director. This was quite a tribute to an artist who must have been well respected in Romania. He won awards at the Cannes Film Festival and worked with some of the top names in Hollywood. Gopo died in 1989 at the age of 66. The Black Church appears to be the most popular attraction in the city. This is an imposing Gothic structure that was completed in 1476, nearly a century after ground was broken. It is one of the largest Gothic churches in Eastern Europe. The prevailing notion is that this is called the Black Church because its walls were scorched by the 1689 fire which devastated the town. One researcher, though, says that it was pollution during the 19th century industrial age that darkened the building. Whichever, after restoration, the name doesn't seem to fit in the present day. There is a fee to investigate the interior. I paid a little less than $4.50. The church is as impressive inside as out. Built by the Transylvania Saxon or German community, services are still held here. The congregation comes from the small German Lutheran community in the city. There is a small museum telling the story of the Black Church. There are tombstones on display from the 15th to 18th century that once were embedded in the floor. There are also Transylvanian rugs that were donated during the 15th to 17th centuries. I enjoyed roaming around for a bit. Nearly surrounded by the city, Tampa Mountain stands at a height of 960 meters. That's about 400 meters above the town. It would be easy enough to walk to the top, but pressed for time, I took the cable car. That's always a great way to get from place to place anyway. The ride was almost $8 round trip, and it took less than 5 minutes each way. Cars were full of people on this Thursday afternoon. Whether you are ascending or descending, it's always a kick to see the town from above while you are on the move. At the top, there was still just a short walk to the main lookout points. At one spot, You are actually behind the Brasov letters that are visible from below.
Always take the high ground. It's easy here because of the cable car, but walk if you have to. You are going to be rewarded with some magnificent views.
It's fantastic to look down upon the city that you have spent time exploring. The elevation makes it possible to see where you've been and the relationship between those various locations. Here in Brasov, taking to Tampa Mountain is an activity that just about everyone who visits has to tackle at least once. At the base of the mountain, a nice promenade gives people a path for an easy walk. It puts you right at the edge of the forest. There was another photographic exhibit here when I wandered by. This one seemed to celebrate new architectural designs from across Romania. I will stop for a few minutes every time when I find a collection of boards such as this. One of my favorite places in Brasov was the Tales of Communism Museum. Romania was under communist rule from the end of World War II to 1989. This museum is full of artifacts from that period. These are simply everyday items and products that were part of the lives of people during that time. It's an astonishing picture of what things were like behind the so-called Iron Curtain. On a rainy afternoon, this was the place to be for visitors intent on continuing their exploration of the town. In addition to the relics on display, there are words from those who lived under the various communist regimes. That adds a personal touch to go along with the physical items that you can see. At one point, Brasov was renamed Stalin City. Hints of the 1989 revolution to come were also seen here in 1987 as 20,000 workers walked off the job to protest economic conditions. That is known as the Brasov Rebellion. Cost to enter the museum was a little less than $8. This is Stratosphori, which translates as Rope Street. Some say this is the narrowest street in Europe. It is 80 meters or 260 feet long, and its width ranges between 44 and 53 inches. That means that nearly everyone can reach out and touch both of its graffiti-covered walls at the same time.
Upon hearing that this was the narrowest street in Europe, I was naturally skeptical, but there might be something to this. There is one street in Germany that might not be quite this wide, but this does appear to be the most narrow street in Eastern Europe.
The first mentions of Rope Street date back to the 17th century. It is thought that the narrow passage was created to assist firefighters in getting from one part of the city to the other. This is one of the places in Brasov that you'll definitely want to pass through while you're in town. I mentioned earlier that the Oktoberfest celebration was being held while I was in Brasov. That festival lasts for 3 weeks and is situated in a park, which is a short Uber ride from the old town. I could only go late on the Thursday afternoon and stayed until the early evening. When I arrived, there were not a lot of people in attendance, but the crowd grew steadily through the time that I left. I am certain that on weekends and later in the evening, the festival is much more well attended.
It might not be prime time, but I'm making the most of it. I have a big German sausage, some sauerkraut, and a Malzbier. It's cold and it's tasty.
From all that I've seen, this is the biggest Oktoberfest celebration in Romania. I also get the sense that this festival is in the early stages and is getting bigger every year. It is certainly not at the level of the massive Oktoberfest in Germany at this point, but just give it time. With all the music and food and a carnival-like atmosphere, people will come. It costs nothing to enter. In its early days, Brasov always seemed to be at risk of attack. That being the case, walls and fortifications were built to protect its residents. Most of that work was carried out between the 15th and 17th centuries. A lot of the fortifications remain. On the south side of the town is the Weaver's Bastion. This is one of the most well-preserved parts of the city's defense. There were 2 phases of construction in the 1400s and again in the 1500s. Reconstruction took place in the 1700s after part of the structure collapsed. Walls here are several meters thick in most places. In exploring the bastion, it's possible to access various levels of the wall on portions of the wooden walkways, just as defenders did in the past. This is such a phenomenal piece of history. It is free to go inside, but a small museum does carry a minimal cost. On the northern side of the city is the Fortress on Straja, otherwise known as the Citadel. It dates to the 16th century. Just assume with all structures such as this that there have been additions and modifications and reconstruction over time. This was a defensive position outside of the walls on top of a hill. Apparently, it is open at times so that you can go inside. There were some nice trails going to and from the Citadel. Several towers that were part of the defense of the city still stand. This is the Black Tower, which dates to the 14th century, although as you notice, that name is no longer descriptive. Its walls were apparently darkened by the 1689 fire. This tower is 11 meters tall, and the deck at the bottom provides another good viewpoint for looking over the town. The White Tower is just a short distance from the Black Tower. Some sources say the two towers were built at the same time, while others say the White Tower came later. The top of this is the highest point in the entire fortification system for Brasov. Walking to the White Tower requires climbing a long series of steps. I could not access the interior of either of the towers when I visited.
In navigating to the Black and White Towers, I made a discovery. This is the Wharf Promenade, really the heart of a system of trails that is just a short distance from the busy downtown. I'm fortunate to have found this.
The promenade is so named because this and both the Black and White Towers are situated on Wharf Hill. It was pleasant simply walking up and down the trails. You can access nature just steps from the streets of Old Town. At the base of the hill is a paved path. This is called Strada După Ziduri, which is translated as the street behind the walls. I also found this when I wasn't even looking for it. Walking along this route is much more satisfying than traversing the city streets just on the other side of the wall. This has some cool features as well. The wall is great, there are also some arches, and the canal flowing to the side is a big plus. There is one gate remaining that was once a portal through the protective wall. This is Catherine's Gate. It was erected in 1559. The top looks a bit like a Disney creation. I've learned that the original gate was broader than this, but the rest was removed long ago. This was originally one of 5 points of access for moving in and out of the city's walls. Part of Catherine's Gate was demolished to allow for the construction of the Schke Gate. That was almost exactly 200 years ago. A taller entry to the town was needed at the time. It includes 3 arched passageways, the biggest for traffic and the smaller ones for pedestrians. There is something to be said about the gate still being used in the modern-day traffic pattern. As you've seen, there is plenty of nature, complete with trails at the edges of the old town. A more traditional city-style green space is Nicolae Tidulescu Park. This space has relaxation at its core. Take the walking paths and you will be immersed in a patch of nature, complete with trees, flowers, and various statues and pieces of art. This is relatively new, as it became part of the landscape in the early 20th century. Government buildings, hotels, and other important structures surround the park. One building next to the park is the Brasov Orthodox Annunciation Church. This place seems to glow at times, and with good reason. It was constructed in the Byzantine style, using brick and granite, which is covered with tin. The interior here is spectacular as well. This gleaming addition to the environment sprouted in the 1930s. The Beth Israel Synagogue in the city is also quite stunning. It began taking shape at the very end of the 19th century and was completed in 1901. Architecturally, it is in the Neo-Gothic style with some Moorish elements. On the grounds is this Holocaust memorial dedicated to the 150,000 residents of Transylvania who were killed. The names of all 240 from Brasov who perished are on the memorial. There was said to be a wooden cross at this spot dating to 1292. This stone building, the St. Nicholas Orthodox Church, replaced a wooden church late in the 15th century. It is an attention-grabbing edifice that sits just a short walk from the main part of the old town. Not only is the church magnificent, but its grounds contain many attractive pieces of art and other features, which enhance the experience of being here. Along with the main square that gets so much attention, there were a couple of others that I enjoyed. This is Piazza Georgianescu. I could never find much information about this, but I thought the space was very comfortable. A cafe and a restaurant or two made this somewhere that you would just want to hang out for a while. I found the Piazza St. John early in my time in Brasov. It was another square that utterly begged you to stay. One entire side of the plaza is devoted to a wall full of street art. The colors and figures invite you to spend some time contemplating what the artist is attempting to say. On the morning that I left, vendors were setting up for a weekend event on that same plaza. The work being put into making the displays as enticing as possible was commendable. It made me wish that I had scheduled my stay in Brasov for a little bit longer. The old town here is an easy place to be. Most of the streets are free of cars, and even on rainy days, strolling is a delightful activity. There are countless cafes and coffee shops in Old Town. I enjoyed 3 of them. I hit Captain Bean when I first arrived in the city. It had wonderful coffee and the most friendly barista. The next day, I stopped into the Nola coffee shop. I thought it might have a connection to one of my all-time favorite cities, New Orleans. Instead, the girl here said that its meaning was related to a bell. The cappuccino was tasty, and the seating was different. On a fantastic final morning, I had my coffee outside at La Biru Bistro. Biru in Romanian means office. I've seen very few offices with as much appeal as this. In Brasov, I stayed at the Casa Baratu. The room was cozy and fashionable. I liked the aesthetic. This was also only a minute or two away from the main square and the Black Church. Perfect.
Brasov is one of the destinations in Romania that is on the list of a lot of travelers who come to the country. I doubt if there are many people who decide to swing through that are sorry about making that choice. I know I certainly am not. After I booked my stay in Romania, the country officially became a member of the Schengen zone. I had to trim several days off of the beginning of my trip in order to comply with the rule that limits how long Americans can stay in the zone. Disappointing, but such is life. Next up for me is Italy. All that travel can be seen right here on Old, Alone, and Far From Home.